One of the things I find most interesting about aromatherapy is how a person can develop a really intimate and deep relationship with certain essential oils. And I'm inviting a friend of mine today to talk about an oil that, frankly, I run a mile from. I have no relationship with this oil at all, and so I'm really looking forward to learning about it. And it's sage essential oil, and so I'm really excited to hear what my friend Ragda has to say about it. Raghda Abdel Maksoud, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy that I'm talking with you, with a good friend and an amazing aromatherapist too. So thank you. And I have a little slideshow. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, by all means, do that. And while you're doing it, tell me, why have you a relationship with such a strange oil? What's invited you into the world of sage?
Okay, so usually when I talk about essential oils and people know that, I'm originally from Egypt with deep roots there with jasmine, neroli, geranium, but a trip to Albania changed my whole perception about how I look into essential oils and why I'm attached to certain plants and essential oils. And I believe the destination makes a lot of difference when you see a plant and deal with it from a completely different perspective. So I originally worked in the flavors and fragrance industry for many, many years. So essential oils for me was a bottle in the laboratory, a discussion during sales meetings, if we're doing, a fragrance or we're selling essential oils or creating something new with the perfumers, or it was an audit that I'm doing with a supplier. But when I started traveling for a project, a specific project, I started seeing essential oils completely different. This was even before I started studying aromatherapy. This leads to that. So it was a visit to Albania, and this was in 2015. And this visit completely changed my mind. So we hop in a car and drove to the northern part of Albania, Shkodra, and I felt that this bridge, it was the bridge that crosses the before and after perception of essential oils for me. And it was a beautiful ride. And this is beautiful Albania, or Chypria, as the Albanians are saying it. I hope I'm saying this right. But I fell in love with the landscape, with the country. It's very virgin, it's untouched beauty. And we went up to the mountains where the sage grow wild. And we're talking about the Salvia officinalis. And I was amazed. I felt like I'm in a fairy tale because the mountains are very rigid, high, steep. The terrain is very difficult for the harvesters to harvest the sage, but they are doing it. And, when you see them going up and harvest and then putting the sage on into donkeys and then little cars and going, it's like something I've never seen before. Right. So, Albania it's like rich, full of botanicals, some of which I've never seen before in real life, not in a bottle. Junipers, chicory, savory, mallow, a lot of amazing stuff. So I stopped and I was thinking, oh, so that's what's happening behind the bottle, right? All of these trips, all of this picking and harvesting and and yes, it's cultivated in some parts of Albania, but the majority is on the beautiful untouched mountains. And how beautiful is this, and how people are, going and working and harvesting and then transferring everything to the cities, whether it's Maminas or other cities where you go to the distilleries and then do the distillation. And after the distillation, before the distillation, the sun drying. Then after the distillation, people will start, the work in the lab, and then, the filtration and all of this. So the whole chain is very valuable. Everything that touched the sage or any other plant from start to end until we got this beautiful small, like little bottle in our hand. It's a huge story of cultures, emotions, sun, moons, a lot of things. So that was something, not that I didn't see this in other countries, but specifically this particular beautiful mountain was completely different.
And that's kind of your background, isn't it? Supply chains and understanding essential oil supply chains.
I graduated from English Literature and Arts, thinking that I will be a writer and I will write, novels and stuff. But a business opportunity came, and I joined this company in Egypt, and the company was one of the leading companies. They do have farms, distilleries, and, working in flavors and fragrance. And I started learning, I started in purchasing actually in the beginning, and I started learning, with French perfumers and chemists, and go to the warehouse and work with people to the production units. Then I started studying supply chain and project management because it was complementary to what I do. So yes, that's like I started somewhere and I ended somewhere else.
That's amazing. What's on your next screen?
So the next screen is when I started touching the sage. It's like it's a master class in subtle beauty. When you're smelling, like we're touching, it's very velvety, and then the color is not like that green. It's sage green. What else has a color, that is after the name of a plant? And then it's fuzzy, it's silver, right? Then you're having those hints of camphorous notes, and then earthy notes and warm notes, and very rich tapestry of colors. And this was like, okay, now the herb is there. I can see it, I can feel it. And although sage was mentioned in Ebers' Papyrus and in the ancient Egyptian, Materia Medica, but it's not one of the culinary herbs that we use in Egypt. It grows wildly in the Sinai Peninsula, but it's not one of the oils or the herbs that I am, it's not something that I use on a daily basis, not like geranium or mint. So for me, that was like, the first meeting between sage and I, right? And it was like beautiful, and it was funny because when people were seeing me like touching it and smelling it and have this connection, they thought that I'm crazy or something, right? But it was so much, it was this connection, the bridge, the mountain, and the sage.
So I just want to fill in a gap in case people aren't aware. So Ragda talked about the Ebers Papyrus, and your school is named after the Ebers Papyrus, isn't it? Do you want to fill in a gap of what that is in case people don't know?
Okay, yes, perfect. Yeah. Do you want me to say what is the Ebers Papyrus? Okay. Yeah. So Ebers Papyrus is one of the ancient Egyptian papyruses. It was discovered by a German Egyptologist. His name was Ebers, and it's now sitting in Germany. And the papyrus is one of the first papyruses that was talking about science more than magic and science in ancient Egyptian, mythology. 800 prescriptions, really perfect prescription with red rubrics and how to use the plants, what to use it for, and for how many days. So it's one of the most fascinating papyruses. And there is a very good book, actually, an English book that translated the papyrus, and I believe it's on Amazon, and it's really good. So I named my school after it. I couldn't find a better connection.
I can't remember how old it is. Can you roughly remember how old it is? I mean,
that's a very good question, and not in my mind right now. I don't remember how old it is.
Be going back about 3,000 years to be able to see both.
Absolutely. I thought you were asking about the day when they discovered it. Yes, more than 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's in perfect condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. What next?
Next is, so in this trip, I learned about a lot of stuff. So I learned about that there is 700 different species of salvia. And although we're doing the sage, the Dalmatian, or the common sage, or the garden sage today, the Salvia officinalis, the other species are like the common species that is used also in the flavor and fragrance industry is the Spanish sage and the Greek sage. And of course, that's different than the white sage that is grown here, the Apiana, that's grown here in the United States. So, even the name tells a story. So when I started this, aromatherapy, for me, sage was sage in the beginning. Yes, there is a botanical name, Salvia officinalis, on the technical data sheet and in the book, and my guide was the Stephen Arkitender book at that time. But I never stopped and thought about the name. So why Salvia, why officinalis, and why Dalmatian? Then the Salvia is associated with the botanical name coming from the Latin word salvare, which means to heal or to save. And this is how it was considered in the Roman Empire, a healing plant and respected for centuries. Then officinalis derives from the Latin word officina, which was the traditional storeroom of a monastery where herbs and medicines were stored. Some people know that and others didn't know. I didn't know that before I started researching. And I knew that in 1735, Carl Linnaeus invented the binomial system of nomenclature and used the term officinalis to identify it as, the species that is used in culinary and practical uses. So one mighty plant with a lot of, I know you're afraid of it, and I was too, but we will see how we can change this a little bit. So let's go here. So the name in Albanian is Sherbel, and in Egyptian or Arabic it's Mariameya. And we mentioned that ancient Egyptians used it for many ailments in the Ebers Papyrus. It was mentioned about fertility and about digestion, but we were talking about the plant, right? And then in the Greco-Roman medicine, Galen mentioned it's diuretic, it's wound healing, and also, going back again to the name, Salvia. Then it is used in different forms. It's used in culinary, and the flavors and fragrance formulations, not highly or widely used in aromatherapy because of the neurotoxicity and, the cautions and the safety studies around it, but we'll just go over and see how this is true. So Kurt Schnoebelt in his book mentioned that the oil, when distilled early, like the leaves are really young, it has low thujone content. And we're only talking about external use here, not internal. And yes, considerations should be taken, but also, if you're using it in dermal application, in Tishran book, there is, I think, 0.4% dermal application. And with IFRA, which is the International Fragrance Association, sage can be used in different applications with certain percentages, depending on, what is it's a leave-in or not. So I like to talk about safety before going into the specific usage or therapeutics. So we are not using sage with pregnant women, children, or anyone suffering from epilepsy or taking any, medications for that. But I researched about sage a lot because I love the plant and I love the essential oil, and it is used in some preparations for muscle pain. If it's, you can add lavender, rosemary, and ginger. For scars, again, Kurt Schnobel mentioned you can use helichrysum, sage, and rose, and I think that that's a beautiful combination if you can smell the three together for scars. It enhances cognitive performance. Some researchers also, and the researchers are at the end of the presentation, and if anyone wants, I can share with them later, that the Tunisian sage have shown great antimicrobial properties to manage airborne microbes. So also antifungal, even with the lower thujone content, as we mentioned, when it's harvested early. And sage is harvested many times during the season. It started, blooming and flourishing in spring, which again, it's just like, okay, that's a spring, plant, which again, I love. So, and approximately, if we're talking about 1 kilogram of oil, that's about a ton of fresh flowering leaves. So I use sage in certain blends when I'm dealing with, clients, or when I'm doing things even on my own here. I love it. A lot of people, when they smell sage in the beginning, it's like, oh, no, it reminds us of Thanksgiving. But when they smell it together, and specifically the lavender, rose, and, helichrysum sage combination, you're using it in a very, very small dilution, and you're, very cautious about safety. So I'm, I found the research, and I started researching a lot about it before using it, because I was afraid, when you're starting in aromatherapy, you're very cautious what you're doing, and, oh, is it contraindicating with this? What is happening with that? So is blue tansy and, mugwort and a lot of other essential oils.
Yeah, one of the reasons I always worried about it was I was taught that it's high levels of sage cause heavy bleeding in women. Now, as you quite rightly say, Tisserand's recommended dose is very, very low. I agree with what you're saying in terms of muscle. I often use it for men for deep muscle strain, but I always stay away from it from women. But I hadn't even really thought about how low that dosage is, and it is really really low, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the harvest time, and when you read the GC and C and where it is coming from, whether it's actually in the flavor industry, they really want the high thujone content of the plant and also the oil, because in the next slide, let me go to the next slide. Sage is widely used in the flavors industry in liquors, in meats, specifically sausage and spices, pickles, tomato sauce. Dried leaves are very popular as, you know, as a spice herb. And Ginger, Andrew, our friend, she is serving the most delicious air fried sage with olive oil in the air fryer, and you have to do
Sage
that.
leaves, yeah. I grow a lot of sage, a lot of different varieties of, well, I should say a lot of different sages and a lot of different salvias, because I also mean like ornamental sages as
Yeah.
well. And as you quite rightly say, deep fried sage leaves are just beautiful. Yeah.
Yes. And so Albania export is the major exporter of sage in the world, and the US is the main importer of sage oil and sage herb in the whole world because of the
Oh,
meat industry and the sausage. And I remember, I don't know if this is true or not, but when I was in Albania and they were talking about sausage, they said that so is meat in Germany and sage is sage, you know, so that's how the name came, sausage. So I don't know about if this is true or not, but it makes sense to me and it's a beautiful
mm,
name, you know. So
yes. And I like the way its name means wise. I always think that it feels like a wise plant. Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. Yes. So yeah, so it's one of the main source of incomes in the medicinal and aromatic plants for the Albanian um, growers. So they love sage and they are very, very proud. And you know, there is always um, projects like the one I was working in to make sure you're not over harvesting. And if you're harvesting wild sage, how you make sure that, you know, sand is not going into the still, or you're not harvesting. This was one of the things in plastic, you know, bags. No, we're not harvesting in paper bags for environmental, you know, aspects, and also to avoid any contamination with the herb, because usually if it is sun dried, it is for smaller scale business, but if it is for big scale business, then they use machines, you know, hydrators and sieves and a lot of things to make sure that there is no particles, no stands, no foreign materials in the sage. And then the majority is the herb, and then the essential oil is part of the process. And then anything that is left after the distillation is used again in the soil for the cultivated sage or for animal feed, you know. So it's very beautiful and very nourishing. I mean, you don't waste anything. It's like, you know, circular economy. Everything is coming
Mm.
back. Yeah, so there is no waste.
It's a tremendous plant for the pollinators as well. The bees, the butterflies, wasps, they all really love it. There was obviously very, very rich in nectar because they're always covered in, yeah, yeah. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
All right. So when it comes to, you know, because I really like to look at the plant as a whole, so we talked about the um, aromatherapy, then we talked about culinary, then Robbie Zeck in her beautiful book, she mentioned that sage assists in spiritual quests, courage and perseverance, physical and mental fatigue. And I think that's that. I mean, look how beautiful it is, and it is a mighty plant for me. Um, the more I think it's earned its reputation from, as you just said, wise, you know, it doesn't grow in easiest places. It grows where it has to fight, adapt, and endure. And perhaps that's why after this years, people are still, you know, turn to sage not only for healing, but for inspiration as well, right? It's not the same sage that the First Nation and Native Americans used in for smudging and incenses, but still it's as mighty as it is in every application you are gonna use it.
Yeah, so the white sage isn't actually a sage, is it? It's an artemisia. This is a sage. And
Yeah.
what's interesting, I think, about it when you grow it is it draws so many nutrients out of the ground. It's greedy, really. It takes a lot away from other plants. But you can tell that it's almost like it's a sponge for all the wisdom in the soil. It wants a bit of everything and it takes it all up. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I'm not an herbalist, right? I study, clinical herbalism, but I know that I think the best person to talk about this will be Kelly Ablard, our Kelly Ablard. But for the First Nation here and for sage, because a lot of people are over harvesting sage, and sage is also it's very sacred. So sweetgrass and red cedar and tobacco for the native people and the First Nation. But from what I learned is that the white sage, the Artemisia californica, is used for purification, mind, body, and spirit. And it's named after, also the Greek goddess. But it's also the desert sage, which is the Salvia apiana, used for medicinal attributes, different genus, used for smudging by different tribes around, North America. So that's completely different than our Officinalis sage.
Mm.
Yeah, so are you still afraid of sage?
Well, I'm frightened of it. I would say, well, no, I'm not frightened of it. It is an oil that I do use spiritually a lot. As you quite rightly say, I always use, well, I use the plant actually, to I don't believe in saying I smudge because that's a First Nations
Right.
practice, but I do use it for smoke work and for purification. And as I say, I do use the essential oil for men's muscles. I just wouldn't necessarily use it for women. And while you have convinced me that it would be okay in small amounts, I very much believe in you have your own healing click. And in everything, there wasn't anything that you said to me that it could do that was thinking, no, I can't think of another oil that would be able to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So probably no, you haven't convinced me to use it more than I would. But actually, that's good because the oil junkie in me doesn't need to buy any new essential oils. But I think what you have done is reminded me not to go to my initial reaction in my body of saying I don't use that, but to check in and say, well, actually, you've learned a new lesson here. Now, if you've absorbed all of that new information, reminding you about the low dosage, think about it again for that client. And quite often when that happens, then that brings a new thread of information through for me. So I'm really grateful for this. But what I also am really interested in was I had never really thought about this supply chain from Albania at all, so that's really fascinating to me. Yeah.
It's a beautiful country and beautiful people, very genuine, very very proud of their plants and their land. And it's a small country, but it's one of, I think, I don't know how many maps they have, but the university in Tirana has a huge, section for medicinal and aromatic plants. And I believe there is a lot of work in the European Union. Also, Albania is not in the European Union, but they still have a lot of projects towards the plants there, the medicinal and aromatic plants there. the other amazing product there is the juniper, the communis and the oxycidrus, which is beautiful. I mean, lavender, and I have a lavender that was growing near sage. It's one of the most spectacular lavenders I've ever smelled. Helichrysum, yarrow, myrtle. So a lot of really, really great plants and aromatics there. Still, unless you work in the supply chain or buy oils or herbs from certain countries, you will not really know the whole. But the supply chain is why I love it, because there is a lot of work behind the products, a lot of people, communities that actually live on that. That's big for their economical part. And harvesters, if we're talking about harvesting, for example, jasmine in Egypt or hibiscus, that's a lot of families like wait for the harvest season because that's their bread and butter. That's where they make money all of the year. And then the companies also working with these communities to make sure that there is fair payment, right? That, fair conditions or fair working conditions, than working on good. People are always saying, oh, good manufacturing practices, but what about good agriculture practices? What about, hazardous analysis and critical control points in that? I don't want to say like big terminology, but even talking with employees and the companies, and they're very welcoming. So when you go and tell them about a critique when you're auditing, you have to do this here, you have to do that here, because of the heat, the dust. You go next day and it's done. So this is not easy everywhere when you're working in the supply chain and audit or working in projects, but in Albania it was really easy. It was fun. Although I don't speak the language, but I felt home.
Mm-hmm. So if you were like an everyday person who is buying a bottle of oil from Albania, is there sort of things that you would suggest for us to have a look at in terms of good practices?
See, I would research the companies first, which means that it's easy to research. Yeah, a beautiful website is not always a true website, right? We have social media. You can call anywhere on WhatsApp, LinkedIn. You can do any type of calls. Back in when I started, you have to pick up the phone and call people internationally and pay. Talk with the people, ask them about their certification, about their sustainability. Some medium-sized and small companies are really, really good. And I cannot generalize, but yeah, research the company, make sure they have answers for all the questions, right? And you can tell from when you speak to them or exchange emails even if they know what they're saying or not, right? I receive a lot of emails, for example, from companies from Egypt who sell, oh, we sell this and we sell that. I was like, okay, I started asking a list of questions, right? Where are you located in Egypt? Are you a trader or are you a manufacturer? How many employees are working the company? I don't want you to tell me your financial, statement or report, how many stills you have, right? Do you have certifications or not? And when I say certifications, it's not necessarily like the organic certification because some plants are wild harvested, but you have systems in place. Let's say if you send me some essential oils and there's a problem, are you gonna honor and trace where the problem were? Is there a traceability system where you work? And then is there a fair pay or fair process in the community or not? Because I'll give you a very good example. So I was teaching a class with Ginger, and I wanted to show them the difference between when you buy an essential oil bottle that you don't know anything about it, which is beautifully packed and you have a lot of reviews, from Amazon, and it was a Blue Lotus Absolute. And you know how rare this is. And then I have a very tiny, tiny Blue Lotus Absolute from years ago. And you open this, and if your nose is trained, it's chemicals. You're hit by a lot of chemicals, right? And the color is blue. You can buy the most beautiful essential oil from Amazon or other sites, and it's not going to work. Then you will blame the essential oil and aromatherapy after that, right? Because it's not working. It smells good, but it's not working the way you want it to work. So this is how if I'm like a regular person buying essential oils, this is what I do. But if I'm a business buying essential oils, there's a whole other story, right? Because you should have a relationship between the distiller and the buyer. There should be a relationship. You should trust them.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I went quiet because I'm like, I've got so many questions, but I've got to sit on them to think about them. I feel like I need you to come back and do a whole new thing just all about it. But what I want to ask you is a question that Adam always asks me on our videos when we're talking about an oil. He always says to me, do you think everybody needs this oil? Do you think everybody needs sage oil?
I think for me, everybody needs oils when they need them. So what do you need an oil for? You don't really need to buy oils just to keep them in the fridge or in your office and, don't do anything with them. You buy the oils when you need them. And why do you need them? And do you need sage, or as you mentioned, do you need other oil that will make the same effect, right? That sage will do. And it really depends on every person, the situation, and the application, and also I think the status when you need the oil, right? So, I mean, sometimes it's like work day, traveling, when I was traveling a lot, and, it's airports, it's different time zones and a lot of, things happening. I would have my small, pouch of my essential oils and inhalers and stuff. And sometimes I didn't really think I need to use them. And sometimes, I'm just like, I need lemon. I don't need lavender. I need lemon to sleep, not lavender, and it works. So yeah. And if you want to use an essential oil and you're afraid of using it, research it first, do the research from the reliable sources, right? And then maybe try the herb first, see if you like it or not, I was drinking sage tea when I was in Albania and juniper tea, and, and I wasn't familiar with them before. That's not one of the herbal tea that I used to drink. And I love it when I go here to, the Albanian stores or the Turkish stores. I buy sage tea and I drink it when I miss it, And
if you were to say, like, the sort of top 3 things that you would use sage for, what would your top 3 things be?
You mean the essential oil or the herb?
Yeah, the oil.
I would use it for muscle pain. And I like how you said for men more than women, so I took this note down. Thank you for that. For grounding, if I want to use it for, and I loved how Kirchnoble mentioned the scars, because the scars is not only outside, it's inside as well. So I would use it for scars. Very, very, very cautiously, right? It doesn't mean that I need to put it on the scar. No, I mean emotionally, spiritually, for internal scars.
I love that. I love it. Ragda, we're going to put your details obviously into the description for people to find you, but I would just like to point out to everybody that this is a rather special person that we have with her because she is the president in running for the new NAHA presidency. She has been nominated by the present president, and so we're looking forward to hopefully seeing her elected in September. I think it will do amazing things for NAHA if you are elected. In the meantime, is there anything that you would like to say to people about your business or anything else before we go?
Well, thank you, Liz, for for mentioning that. And I enjoyed this a lot. I rarely do podcasts, really. I'm a little shy behind the camera. So I like more to write and teach. But I really enjoyed the conversation and your questions and sharing, something that I didn't share before with anyone about my favorite oils or stage or, Albania. So yes, what I would like to share is that feel free to contact me anytime. Ebers Aromatherapy. It's like we usually teach in New Jersey, New York area with schools and hospitals and do workshops and webinars with Ginger Andrew. Online as well. We do study tours, which is one of the things that I really like to. Maybe one day we'll take people to Albania. So the study tours are like the real life experience of seeing cultures, communities, and what we have been talking about today. Apart from that, I'm working as the International Relations Committee Chair for NAHA and Egypt Director as well. So please visit the NAHA website for more information about webinars, about Liz also. She's the UK Director. And yeah, that's all what I want to say about, my work. I like, so it's funny because I really like the part of me as an aromatherapist and educator, but I also really like the consultancy and projects. And this is why I love, this is a big part, projects, consultancies, helping people and helping with my experience to shape, and change some stuff that I can for the greater benefit of everyone.
I think you're absolutely the right person for the job. You have my absolute vote. And I also have to tell you, you should not be shy of being on film. You're very, very good at it.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll get you back again. But for now, thank you so much, Ragda. Say goodbye.
Thank you, Liz. Bye.